So when I came to Odisha, I had, one of the theories I have is I was born and brought up in Andhra, although I'm a Punjabi. So my parents always taught me to learn the local language, that is Telugu. So I can read, write, and speak Telugu. But at the same time, they told me not to forget my roots, which is that I must learn Hindi and Punjabi, which is my mother tongue. So, not forgetting mother tongue and being able to learn new languages is something that they always told me. So, I think having come from that background, when I got married and moved to Odisha, my first objective was how to learn the language and communicate in the language to the people around me. So that was my first objective. But my theory is always that while I learned Telugu because I lived in Andhra and I learned Hindi and Punjabi because it is my mother tongue, I learned Odia for love. So that's my theory always.
ଆପଣ ସେଇ ପରିପ୍ରେକ୍ଷୀରେ ଯେତେବେଳେ କହୁଛନ୍ତି ଆମେ ରିଭିଜିଟିଂ ଦ ରୁଟ୍ସ ଆମେ କଥା କହୁଛୁ ଏ ବହି ମଧ୍ୟ ସେଇଠି କନେକ୍ଟେଡ୍ ଅଛି ଆପଣ ସେ କ୍ଷେତ୍ରରେ ଦେଖୁଛନ୍ତି ଏ ବହିର କଣ୍ଟେମ୍ପୋରାରୀ ପ୍ରାସଙ୍ଗିକତା କ'ଣ ଆମେ ଏଭଳି ବହିଟେ କାହିଁକି ଲେଖିବା ଅଥର ଜଣେ ଏଭଳି ବହିଟି ଲେଖୁଛନ୍ତି ଆପଣ ତାଙ୍କୁ ଓଲଟା କ୍ୱେଶ୍ଚନ ପଚାରି ପାରିବେ ତେଣୁ ଆର ପ୍ରାସଙ୍ଗିକତା କ'ଣ ଆପଣ ଜଣେ ମହିଳା ଉଦ୍ୟୋଗପତି କହିବି ନା ଏଣ୍ଟରପ୍ରେନ୍ୟର କହିବି ବୋଥ୍ ହଁ ତେଣୁ ସେ ଦେଖୁଛନ୍ତି ଏହାର ଭ୍ୟାଲ୍ୟୁ କ'ଣ ଛୋଟ ପିଲାଟି ପାଇଁ ଭ୍ୟାଲ୍ୟୁ କ'ଣ कल्चरल अवेकनिंग पे वैल्यू कौन स्कूल लाइब्रेरी पे वैल्यू कौन आ हमर रूटेडनेस को कनेक्ट करिवार वैल्यू कौन
I believe that it's very important to read for children. Reading is very, very important. In fact, ajikoro dinre apno dekhibe that most children are stuck to television sets. Although I'm in the business of television and I must propagate viewing television, but when it comes to children,
now think a television promoter saying read books
for the children. I'm saying young children ought to be reading much more, whether it is about the Puranas or whether
and while watching television read.
No, don't watch television and read. Spend more time. So, for instance, when we were children, we were told you can only watch television once a week, and that is on Saturday or Sunday. And fortunately, there weren't too many programs except Doordarshan at that time, so we didn't miss much. It was easy to do. But today, the children have so many opportunities on television. They have so much content to consume that they are constantly wanting to watch something or the other. So yes, in today's day and age, it is far more difficult to get children to read. But I think reading should be a very important habit for every child.
Do you reckon reading stories? Did you mean to that? Reading?
Everything. Reading anything is great. Whether it's stories, whether it is fiction, non-fiction, it doesn't matter. It just gives you more knowledge. It gives you more understanding. Recently, I read about a 13-year-old child who has been writing, who's written a murder mystery. So I thought it was very interesting. And so I think so it's not just the Puranas. I think Puranas, of course, is a very important aspect that every child should learn. I myself have been very fascinated by Bhagavad Gita. And talking about Vedas, just want to spend 2 minutes because it's your book launch and, we shouldn't digress from that and go to my life. But let's focus on the book launch. So we started by talking about your book on Sri Devi biography and this book. Then we talked about Vedas. Then we talk about Jugos, which Yugo mein tha. Correct? So my first question would be that you wrote a biography on Sri Devi, which is so different from the mythology. I mean, I'm sorry to use the word mythology, but due to lack of any other word, I have to use it. So, and then you write this mythological. Now, we all know that when a writer writes a book, research is a very important aspect of the book, right? While Sri Devi's biography had a different kind of research, mythology has a different kind of research. Between the two, which one do you think was most daunting?
I'll just add one word there. Mythology can be synonymized with ancient tales, ancient stories. So let's put mythology to rest and give it a proper cover dena hai isko. And Devdutt Patnaik ji proudly says I'm a mythologist. So anyway, he propagates. We don't agree with him.
No, I do agree with him because like I said, mytho is a very, very misunderstood word, poor thing. But like you said, we can maybe talk about that a bit in this session. To answer your question, Jagi, I think definitely the Sridevi book, the research for that was a lot more daunting. Because it involved, since she had passed on by then, if she was alive, it would have been probably a much different experience. But since she had passed on, so for me, the process became about meeting everybody that she worked with. So I remember meeting about 70 people that she worked with, both down south and in Bombay, actors, directors, her family. So because then in her absence, they became the voice and they shared the memories that is what the book is all about. So it involved a lot of traveling, putting, also when you're writing about a person's life, it calls for a different kind of caution. It calls for a different kind of respect and reverence. How do you put that, even though she's a public figure, but she was someone who very fiercely guarded her private self from everybody, and I wanted to respect that. So there were a lot of parameters within which I had to write that book, so it was a daunting process. Mahagatha has been an absolute joy, a complete joy, because having said that, even the Puranas, of course, needed for me to give it the same kind of respect and reverence, because this is such a huge part of our culture and heritage,
very complicated,
and
yes.
very complicated. And also for me, the most important thing was to make sure that I keep the purity of the stories alive when I'm presenting them to the readers around today, because every story has a soul. So while I might have taken creative liberties in terms of the body of the stories, the soul remains untouched, unvarnished, untainted. I wanted that to be to come across. So it's important for you to nurture that, give it the respect and reverence, and present it that way. So, but the research never felt like a chore, because it was like every day waking up to a new story, a new wisdom, And the Puranas is a fascinating world. I mean, there are stories about, probably everything under the sun is there in it's like an encyclopedia, So that it was a process of absolute joy.